Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Illuminating the Stories That Bind Us podcast. Today, we have a really trendy, controversial topic. The topic is ketamine assisted psychotherapy, otherwise known as CAP. And this is a form of psychotherapy. And I am curious what all the listeners right now are having pop in their head. What story or belief is popping into your head when you hear me say ketamine assisted psychotherapy? Is it a breakthrough? Is it a horse tranquilizer? Is it life saving? Is it controversial? Is it painful? Or is it pleasurable? If any of those thoughts popped in your head, hold on to them. In this episode, we are going to explore all sorts of stories and beliefs that are in and around the revolutionary findings of CAP. And we're going to discuss the stories that keep people from trying it, even though it is an innovative approach and healing with overwhelming results of its effectiveness. What is getting in between people trying it? And what are the benefits? What are some of the arguments against it? And what are some examples that maybe we have today? So, who better to have this interview than one of my favorite people in this world? And that is Dayna Wood of Integrative Counsel. Welcome, Dayna, and thank you so much for being here.
Jen, thank you so much. It's always so exciting to get to speak and work with you. And I really appreciate you allowing time and space to talk about this because there are a lot of stories around ketamine specifically, but also psychedelics and how those can be therapeutic, but also the fears that come up when we start talking and working with these molecules. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I'm very excited for us to explore all aspects of it. And I can't help but start with just so Dana, you have a group practice in St. Petersburg, Florida called Integrative Counsel, and your practice is committed to bringing together mind, body, spirit, creativity, and science.
Mhm.
So I am really curious, what drew you to include CAP as a repertoire of Integrative Counsel?
Sure. We like to pride ourselves on creative, out of the box thinking while founded in really sound science and research. And CAP is both of those things. And so, as you mentioned, I'm a registered expressive arts therapist as well as a licensed mental health counselor. We have another art therapist on staff. We've had another art therapist on staff who recently retired. I mean, this is our ethos: is how to go beyond simply talk therapy. There's certainly a place for traditional psychotherapy, and yet there is so much suffering. And so, when we can get beyond our verbal defenses, which is often left brain, linear, logical, and able to access more of that limbic system where those deep seated emotions and memories are held, we can have really dramatic impact. So, creativity, somatic work, breath work, grief work, because that usually brings everything right to the surface, as well as psychedelic assisted.
Wow, so it pulls together. It's a perfect fit. It's because
Mhm.
you already before you even considered this as another tool in your practice, you already were doing out of the box approaches. You were already using creativity, you're already using imagination, you're already using some of these other creative therapies. So this just fit in perfectly.
Exactly.
Mm.
Um, and it's coming. I mean, there might be something that it implodes again, similar to the second wave. So we're on the third wave of psychedelics. The first wave is more of the indigenous cultures and how they use this. The second wave, as most of us are aware of, in the 60s, and its downfall, from there. And like, can we take those lessons into this third wave and do it differently? But that being said, it's around the corner, and it will be and already is starting to be much more discussed, talked about, research.
Absolutely. I'm seeing it everywhere, and I know a lot of my listeners know how much I love internal family systems, and it's been huge in that. Yes, yeah, they're
App and IFS go like this because they just make so much sense together.
yes, they really do. They really do. Just the journeying and being able to unburden the exiles, and we could go down that road, but
Oh, yeah. That's exciting. That's a whole other podcast and training.
it is,
So
it is, it is, it is. It is, and I remember when I went to, conference in Washington, DC a year or so ago with the Psychotherapy Networker, it was all the talk with all the big trauma people. Bessel van der Kolk was saying, like, "This is it, people." Like, here he is. I don't know how old he is, bless him, but, he's up in years, and he was like, "Hey, if I'm gonna start telling people to do it, I need to go try it." So, he was explaining his journeying and his whole process with it. So, I mean, these are therapists that have been in the field and have tried everything and seen everything and written about everything and researched about everything, and they're giving it a go and supporting it.
mhm, mhm. When done ethically and within the right context. And I'm sure we're going to talk more about this in this episode, Jen, but the importance of sound setting and intentionality and just having really rigorous uh, guardrails. Yes.
Yes,
It's going
yeah.
to prevent it from imploding this time around.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I guess it's that third wave that you're saying, that third wave. So so why don't we go into the benefits first? We'll kind of dive in and swim in the controversial, but let's talk about why it is everywhere and why the third wave happened, right? If the third wave would be happening if there wasn't something to take from it.
Sure.
And I know I've told you, just preparing in this and just told you before, I have two distinct clients that did some form of psychedelics outside of our sessions, obviously. I am not I am not certified. I'm not doing it in my practice,
Mhm.
but can remember distinctly one saying to me, she was like, "Jen, you everything that we did in our work together was a foundation. But I connected with someone, this is years back. I connected someone with someone that does the mushrooms and psychedelics to help heal trauma. And she said, the work that you and I did, and then this, I was able to forgive my parents and their abuse that I have been holding." And she was like, it was gone.
Because it's no longer just thinking about forgiving, it's experiencing the forgiveness. That's what
Mm,
these medicines, molecules, psychedelics help with,
thinking to
given the
experiencing.
safety of the context and the preparation that goes in prior.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yes, yeah. And yeah, so it's the thinking and the going from thinking to experiencing, going from thinking to experiencing, which makes me think about the healing qualities of imagination, right?
Uh-huh. And IFS, because you get into a similar sort of um, imaginative space, right? A non-ordinary state of consciousness, I should say. So with a lot of the
Mm,
guided meditations and IFS or a lot of the art therapy work or expressive arts therapy, you do get into a non-ordinary state of consciousness and you get to experience that forgiveness. Or in my most recent grief, right? However, once I was able to experience it, then it's not repressed in my experience in the same way, and therefore it's not hijacking, burdening other parts in the
mm,
same way.
mhm, mhm. And Dana, I am curious. So, thank you for sharing that you've experienced it. And I know that you understand everything from a brain science point of view. So, what does it assist? What does it help? What do psychedelics or ketamine help with
Sure.
that,
Let's
like, you're doing it's a little different, right? That
Yeah.
imagination journey has something different.
Yes, let's get into it because yes, we're able to access various non-ordinary states of consciousness through a variety of means, not just psychedelics, but what specifically are psychedelics doing? And let me speak about ketamine specifically because that's what's currently legal, like on a nationwide level. I know there's psilocybin available in some states, et cetera, and the likelihood of it becoming also available on a nationwide level within the next year is highly likely. Same with MDMA is in the process of being FDA approved. It's going to be very restrictive who and where and how they're going to provide that for the first 7 years, especially. Again, so it doesn't backfire in the ways that we have learned from the past that it can. So, ketamine specifically, because it's what's most available, is an anesthetic. It was first produced in 1962 for use in the fields with soldiers during the Vietnam War, actually,
Mm.
because it was so safe essentially to take on to the battlefield. It became FDA approved in 1970 as an anesthesia and is on the World Health Organization of essential medication. So this isn't, I know people talk a lot about it as a party drug and the K-hole, but no, this is a really, really important medicine.
Mhm.
Um, it's currently being prescribed off label for treatment resistant depression, PTSD, severe anxiety is being used in the ER for suicidality. That is one of the fastest reductions in suicidal ideation of any medication that's out there.
Wow. Wow.
That's usually through the nasal spray, Spravato. So there's one of the also benefits of ketamine is it can be administered in so many different ways that make it more accessible. For instance, as a therapist, we are able to provide it, not us personally, because we don't to do any of the medical piece, but our clients receive it as lozenges or people can have it through IV or IM more in a clinic setting. And we'll get into a little bit about the differences between those two because I think it's important to differentiate between them, especially when you're potentially thinking, is this a good fit for me?
Mhm.
Um, what also makes ketamine unique is it works on the glutamate um, modulator, excuse me, so the glutamate receptors. So it's different than other like anti-anxiety, antidepressant medications, and so there's a lot more research of like why this works differently. And it's starting this research, and so what makes ketamine specifically and psychedelics in general potentially beneficial is it's able to bypass essentially our ego and
Mhm.
all of our defenses. It's a freeing of the mind. We get ourselves into such tight mazes that it's hard to see beyond them and to therefore ultimately think and act differently. That's the whole point of psychotherapy, right? And healing is like, oh, how can I grow and change? And so it helps bypass the thing that we feel so stuck oftentimes. Um, Ketamine specifically is a dissociative anesthetic. So what that means is this, it feels as if there's this sort of lifting or going beyond the ordinary. Um, Different psychedelics have different sort of obviously chemical makeups, but also a different journey of sorts.
So those last 2 things I think you said are important because one, like you said, it bypasses any of the beliefs or stories that may be blocking someone from receiving any kind of healing or inspiration or right? Things like that. And then also the it's hard to put into words, and you just did much better than I think I'm about to, but just you're more expansive. You can think
Yes.
beyond. You don't have it like constricted to like this is the only way this will be fixed. Like you can think of something that's like you're rising above it in some way and thinking of it in a much expansive and bigger picture way.
Exactly, and, like, getting into a little bit of the brain science. I'm not, like, a neuroscientist. I just feel it's necessary for all therapists to have some understanding of what is happening in the brain and mind. Is ketamine has the capacity to assist in the regrowth of dendrites, meaning there's neuroplasticity, especially within that like 2 to 10 day window. So we can really begin to think differently, be different. The question becomes then, how do we use that window? And I've just seen it used not horribly successfully, or other people who really do take advantage of that neuroplastic window, which is
Mhm.
pretty amazing. Like we can really begin to retrain our brains, repattern them
Mhm. Mhm.
from trauma to something beyond.
Yeah, yeah, which is so breaking through the story, right? Breaking through the pattern. So that feels like the perfect segue of just using this as an intervention and what it entails for you in your practice, right? Like what is kind of the walk us through what
Right.
needs to be in place in order for someone to experience the benefits of ketamine assisted psychotherapy.
Sure. There's a number of steps to keep it again safe and ethical, and like how do we make sure someone has the most deep and transformative experience possible. So really, this isn't just about getting high, and that's oftentimes I think what popular culture or fears, like, oh, someone just wants to get high, so they're going to this ketamine, right? So
Mhm.
in psychotherapy, so there is ketamine assisted psychotherapy, or CAP. There's also ketamine being administered in clinics, right? And those can look very, very different. So, ketamine administered in clinics, and there's some really good clinics. So, I'm not saying all clinics are like this, but it's mostly people going in, getting the IV or IM, um, and not having much interaction, connection. You sometimes just being sent back out. With no opportunity to create a sense of meaning or change, right? So, I'm going to say something potentially a little controversial. That looks a little bit more like just getting high, right? Whereas in used in the psychotherapeutic context, there's multiple steps to ensure safety. So we've partnered with a medical team called Journey Clinical. I don't. Their intention is to operate across all 50 states. I don't think they're quite there yet.
Mhm.
Um, they provide all the medical piece as well as the consultation, as well as training. They as well as the platform that you enter it and the collaborative care model. So we're in constant contact with the prescribing doctors, etc. Um, on our side, we have a very thorough intake, 90-minute intake to see if someone is a first. There's a screening. There's a few rule outs that someone isn't a good fit. For instance, uncontrolled hypertension, because ketamine can, in a transitory way, increase hypertension, like during the experience and shortly after. So there's a full few rule outs. If someone is actually manic or in psychosis, not a good idea to be doing
Mhm.
the psychedelic, can amplify
Mhm.
things. However, that being said, there's a very thorough intake. There's an understanding of what's going on, what you've tried, what hasn't worked, what can be done differently this time. What is your intentions and hopes? Oftentimes, people like sort of unknowingly and innocently transfer expectations to the medicine. It's actually really hard not to. Like someone's going through this whole process because they want something, and it's really easy to attach that, But what I've learned from doing this work for myself, so I have been on my own ketamine journey for healing, and multiple, right? It's usually like an 8 series protocol. That it's not necessarily always what we want or intend or expect. Oftentimes, medicine gives you what you most need. And so,
Mm.
how to create the safety, the container to allow that to come to the surface. And that's so much easier said than done, in all honesty. So, why I'm mentioning this is there's so much preparation on the front end to get someone really ready for the journey. The journey, our dosing session is what it's called, is clients who have been prescribed the medication through Journey Clinical. We don't touch it, we don't store it, we don't do anything with it. They let it dissolve under their tongue for 12 minutes. They swish it, not swallowing. They spit it. They lay back. They have their own internal journey. Oftentimes, that's what it looks like. Not with everyone. Some people are still able to communicate or talk through it, or a variety of experiences can happen there. You don't quite know. And then there's integration on the other side. Come back from that experience again with trust that your inner psyche is guiding some of that healing process. And that is where the magic begins to happen, because again, it's within that neuroplastic windows when you have your integration session. Okay, what do you do with this information? How do you begin to live it out in your daily life?
Yeah, so it sounds like when it's combined with the psychotherapy, like the model that you have with Integrative Counsel and Journey Medical, is that
Journey
yeah,
clinical.
Journey Clinical. The collaboration the two of you have really, before, during, and afterwards enriches the entire experience and intention and holding the person through this journeying and making sure that it it has not I don't want to say, but it has purpose and intention that goes beyond just even the journey itself. Like that, like you said, that neuroplasticity is what sounds like that's the time that like, okay, what are we going to take from this? Where where does
Exactly.
where does this go moving forward? Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm,
Exactly. So it's a commitment, and it's a commitment not to take lightly, because it is profound inner work. And you and I have talked before, Jen, around this saying, you have to go slow to go fast. So
mhm.
there's a lot of preparation. Um, there's a lot of sort of readiness, determining if there is a readiness to do this, a trusting of your own healing wisdom. And then, am I ready to make those shifts, those changes on the other side? Ketamine will help, and then you got to live it out, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So you're able to do this deep work in a pretty concentrated way. And yet, there's a lot of steps that go into it.
Yes. And that makes me think of the article that you wrote um, about which is the thing that I love the most about IFS. And that's huge to say that there's something that I love the most. And it is. And I'm getting like tears in my eyes that this is how much I love it. I love that I'm
Mm,
empowering my clients to self-heal.
yes,
I
exactly.
I love like, that is my favorite part about IFS. It's like, I'm facilitating this, but then you're gonna take this, and anytime this part gets activated again, you are gonna be able to self-heal, self-connect, self-understand. And there's a similar energy to CAP, it sounds like.
Oh my gosh, Jen, thank you so much for bringing up this point, because I too could get on a soapbox and like want to usher it from every corner of what this means. And I think it requires a complete shift in thinking from externalizing our healing onto X, Y, or Z,
Yes.
doctor, medicine, um, religious leader, right? Like,
Yeah.
such a instinct to want to externalize our healing, because then it's like, okay, I don't have to do much. I just have to take this or follow this creed or something. And that's not actually what psychedelics are best used for. I don't think it's how healing and transformation actually take place. It is the day to day healing from within. And that is what psychedelics allow us, if we choose, right? Is how do we begin to trust our own healing wisdom, get out of our own ways in many times,
Mhm.
um, and allow the healing to take place in ways that I can guarantee you won't expect. every time that I've gone into a session with someone, it is never what I anticipate. It is always different. And it's a different experience for each person. Right? I don't know what their inner psyche is going to reveal, but there is an agreement on the front end that we will trust what it does reveal, and we have the tools, the resources to work with it from there.
Love it. And this is something that I just, doing workshops this weekend, this is something I say often is what I can facilitate in them, and I guess in this case, what the ketamine journey and the support and the safety that you're providing for them, what then happens in them is genius.
Yes, exactly. And it's
Nothing I
not
could
my
ever tell them.
genius. All
Exactly.
I'm doing is, yes, I'm creating the safety, the structure, the processes, but it is their genius.
That's it.
It's nothing to do with me.
That's
You
it.
know?
And I find that what their as you said it, inner psyche tells me is, like, far beyond,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
the shortcut problem solving, fixing advice I could give them. Like, what they come up with and their inner wisdom, right, is just beyond it. So I'm like, "Why don't I just facilitate that? That's what we're gonna do here." Like, here and there, maybe I can pepper in some wisdom, but, like, there's a journey in there that you you have access to, and so ketamine assists that.
And it takes work, right? It's not um uh fix all. It's like, oh, these are the lessons I like in being faced with, okay, what do I do with those, on a
Mhm.
day?
Mhm.
How do I continue to show up for myself?
Mhm. Oh, Dana, we could always talk about 5,000 things.
Mm.
All right. So I feel like we've touched upon not only the benefits, but I feel like we had a really good, elaborate conversation around the how,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So it's
Mhm.
like
Sort of
we're
what's
tr
happening.
yes, exactly. So why are people closing themselves off to this, right?
Well, I think it's a lot to do with what happened in the second wave. Government crackdowns. There was unethical behavior. There was negative media portrayal, internal fractures, exploitation. Then the anti-drug movement came, which is ironic. I don't know if this for sure, but I'm pretty confident that when the anti-drug movement came, this pharmaceuticals sales also went way up. So the irony
Wow.
of that.
Yeah.
Um, Psychedelics specifically are not supposed to be taken daily, obviously. Again, with Journey Clinical, the protocol's typically around 8 sessions. Then this looks oftentimes different in clinics, but I don't work in a clinic, so I can't really speak to that. But I know
Mhm.
this model, it like, and ketamine itself isn't that expensive. It's out of patent, right? So how are pharmaceuticals going to make money on this? They aren't, right? That's the thing. So, yes, I got off on that tangent when I don't know if that's a fear, but I think it's just facts and information when we begin to actually look at our fears, is what's really going on. Ketamine, when done under the care of a trained provider and a licensed medical, provider and trained therapist, it is incredibly safe. It's used in the NICU. It is one of the safest uh, anesthetics there is, right? And there's so many story around drugs. It's used in the party scene, so there's so much terminology. The K-hole, that sounds really scary, right? What is that? That make it frightening because we don't have all the facts. But when we start to learn actually what it is, what happens, how can I approach this in a way that is safe, ethical, we can begin, I think, to soften some of those stories.
Mhm. Yeah, almost debunk them, rewrite them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mhm.
And it's not the best fit for everyone. I like want to make that super clear. Like, psychedelics is not the best fit for everyone. Ketamine is not a good fit for everyone. Like I mentioned, uncontrolled hypertension. No, it's not a great fit.
Mhm. Yes, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's so good for people to know, right? It again, since we're on this IFS and ketamine assisted psychotherapy train, there are people who tell me flat out tell me like I don't like IFS, right? So there's also taste um
Exactly.
that goes
Preference.
beyond, yeah, preference, exactly. That goes beyond what stories are there and beliefs like people, different strokes for different folks type of thing. Um yeah, and I know with IFS the idea I remember hearing in one of the trainings when they spoke to it, and I know that this would be true for me personally if I ever tried it, is you have to have all of the protectors and
Mhm.
managers in your system agree. Like they
Yep.
have to be okay that you're doing this. Yeah.
Yes. Because what ketamine does is essentially bypass those protectors and managers.
Yeah.
And that they're there for a reason, right? So we need to get their permission before they come
Exactly.
in.
Yeah, yeah. Yep, exactly. They need to be like, "All right, this is cool. This is safe."
Mhm, mhm, and that's usually with a lot of education, um, researched material and facts. So, Huberman Lab, so he's amazing, right? And man, he knows his his everything, but especially his brain science, and says just is able to break it down with such ease, or it appears because he's so articulate, right? So the Huberman Lab, he has a really amazing episode on ketamine. Goes into all the facts, all the research, most relevant, so I will send you the link, Jen, so you can put it in there for people who want to learn more. He's a great resource.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, thank you for that. So, what do you have any advice for podcast listeners that are considering this as an intervention in their healing journey?
Do your research because I guess it depends what you're wanting to get out of it. If you're wanting
Mhm.
um, to go slow to go fast, meaning willing and open and ready to do that deep work, so there can be profound change and all the steps prior and during and after. Um, there are certainly trained professionals that, and this can be a very safe method of doing deep work in a concentrated way that isn't years but months, and yet it requires a readiness. Mhm.
Mhm.
And I think part of that readiness is a trusting in your own, again, wise self, to be in the lead there.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, very good advice. So, do your research, be informed, and then decide and confer with your wise self. Is this the best for me?
Mhm. So Journey Clinical, they operate in Massachusetts and quite a few providers there. That I know that's where you're based, Jen.
Mhm.
You can go on to their website, and they have a ton of good free information, as well as the potential to get matched with someone in your area. Because through Journey Clinical, you can do it in person or in groups or even remotely. Um, to just try to make it as accessible as possible for people.
Okay. All right. So I'll definitely have those links part of this description as well. Well, Dana, I am so grateful for this opportunity. I feel like I learned a lot. There were a couple of times I was taking notes, just about not only what happens and the how, but its effectiveness. I had no idea that they were using it in emergency rooms to reduce suicidality.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
that was like kind of
It's so
mind expanding.
fascinating. Mhm.
Yeah, wow.
Mhm.
I had a moment because suicide prevention is something that I do feel very tender towards, and I had a moment of thinking of all the lives because if they could wake up the next day, they
Yes.
usually don't want to take their life. It's just getting through. I mean, if we did the math, it's probably a certain time frame that's very short that they just have to get through. So it sounds like that's what that does. It gets you through.
It can, yeah, it's, an almost instant anti-anxiety antidepressant.
Mm, mhm, mhm.
Yeah. Again, that effect doesn't last forever. It's that
Yes,
plastic window, but the work that can be done when someone is ready in the neuroplastic window.
yes, yeah. Yeah, wouldn't it be a beautiful thing if and maybe this is already happening, but when that is inserted as an intervention, that then there's, like, this follow-up program, that they
I
go
know,
through
like,
that's not like mental health institution, right?
oh my gosh, the possibilities are truly endless. The question becomes, as a society, are we going to go beyond our stories and fund it? Because again,
Mhm.
we often go where the money is, and that I don't know if there's money in the healing piece, you know?
Yes,
And
yeah.
so, how can we begin as a society to honor where some of these psychedelic medicines have come from and the indigenous knowledge through thousands of years? Um, and begin to put emphasis on the healing and growing and transforming piece, which means change, which doesn't always mean looking for the large
Got it,
industries.
got it, got it. So it's humanistic. It's more of a humanistic approach and what it would do for our society in the long run for having just healed trauma, um, and people living beyond their stories and not
Yeah.
bound by them and following their dreams is far more expansive than the capitalist,
You
gain.
said beautifully. And it's rewriting our stories around drugs that are different
Yes.
than pharmaceuticals that you take daily,
Yeah. Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. And how many people are doing drugs because of their trauma.
Yeah, yeah.
So if they healed it, you may not have to reach for it, right? Yeah. Wow, Dana. Well, we could clearly talk for another hour, but
Yeah,
we will wrap it up. And I just thank you. Thank you for you've had to break through a ton of stories. We'll save that for another podcast episode, but
for
you
sure.
had to
Yeah.
break through a ton of stories, just even the ones that we're mentioning about society, right? You're outside of the box, Dana, with this, you
It was
know?
risky. It's been risky to bring a group practice on board. I'll get all of our clinicians trained, and yeah, you're right. I really had to like sit with this and like, is this a direction that feels best for all? And I think done wisely, it has tremendous power for healing.
Yeah, yeah. It'd be really cool to touch base with you, say in a year, and
Yeah,
to be able to count the number of people who are now accessing their self-healer,
yeah,
and have moved beyond whatever it was that was keeping them bound.
yeah. Beautifully said. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah,
Thank you again for this opportunity.
absolutely. Thank you, Dana. Thank you everyone for listening. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. If you have found any of this inspiring or helpful, please share this episode with a friend. Visit www.jenniferhcarey.com for more information about my psychotherapy and coaching services, as well as upcoming events, workshops, and retreats. Wishing you joy, freedom, and healthy relationships.